The moon landing is one of Flat Earth's favourite topics to talk about. Of course, the moon landing and its entire existence has nothing to do with the shape of the Earth. However, it does spark conversation about something which the Flat Earthers absolutely do not want existing, and that is space itself. Because space completely ruins their attempt at trying to prove their pancake with a bowl over it model. They have to try and discredit everything to do with space, otherwise their entire worldview comes crashing down. Hello all and welcome along to another episode of Flat Earth Friday with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. Before we begin today, a quick thank you to the sponsors of today's video, Blinkist. Does it happen to you where you just want to read a book but you don't have time? Did you ever want to be a better version of yourself, a more confident, knowledgeable you? And this is where the Blinkist app comes in. Blinkist takes tops non-fiction titles and puts them into small 15-minute text and audio explainers called Blinks. And you can use Blinks to learn about topics such as philosophy, history and science, or dive into psychology, health and nutrition, or personal growth. You've got thousands of titles and 27 categories of the world's best knowledge to choose from. And you can read these books or listen to them podcast style or even access them offline. I use Blinkist when I have a spare half hour or so at home in between working on videos. And at the moment I'm finding An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth by Chris Hadfield particularly enjoyable. First 100 people to go to blinkist.com/SimonDan will get 1 whole week to try it out, and then you'll get 25% off if you want the full membership. That 7-day trial, by the way, is completely free and you can cancel at any time. Remember, visit blinkist.com/SimonDan to start learning today. Right, back to today's video, where the Prince of the Flat Earthers, Mr. Eric Dubay, has decided to have a pop at the Apollo Lunar Modules. It becomes very apparent very quickly though that Eric Dubay has no clue what he's talking about, as per usual.
Take a second to honestly observe the following picture and tell me what this looks like to you.
Ah, that looks like the lunar lander used by the Apollo program.
If you said a bunch of cardboard, construction paper, curtain rods, gold tape, and foil, you would be correct.
Okay, yes, granted it does look a little bit like that, but it is still the lunar lander used by the Apollo program.
If instead you said the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's highest technological achievement, incapable of being reproduced today, the Apollo 11 lunar lander, then you would also be correct.
Ah, so I was correct. But what does he mean when he says incapable of being reproduced today?
Most unbiased viewers would assume your average high school art class could construct this contraption without much struggle.
I highly doubt that. The Lunar Module was a 7-metre tall 2-stage craft with a mass of 14,000 kilograms with crew and propellant on board. With 2 engines and 6 batteries on board, the Lunar Module was a highly sophisticated craft of its time.
But official NASA spokesman and astronaut Don Pettit assures us that actually this 1969 technology is so advanced that even with their multi-billion-dollar yearly budget, they cannot for the life of them recreate it now.
But did Don Pettit specifically mention the Lunar Module when he said this? Let's take a look.
I go back to the moon in a nanosecond, Don informs us. But NASA destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Now I'm pretty sure I know what Don is talking about here in that quote, but let's hear Eric's take on it.
Firstly, why on earth would NASA destroy the original Apollo lunar landers? The historic first crafts that landed men on the moon? The supposed most incredible achievements of mankind? And they irreparably destroyed them so that they could not be replicated even after 50 years?
I think it's a very foolish thing to try and debunk something when you don't fully understand it, Eric. The bottom half, or the descent stage of the lunar module, stays on the moon as the ascent stage lifts off to return the crew to the command module in orbit around the moon. Once docked, the top half of the lunar module is then ejected by the astronauts. The lunar modules of Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16 and 17 crashed onto the moon shortly after their release. The lunar module of Apollo 13 burnt up in the Earth's atmosphere, as it was obviously used as a lifeboat to get home after that horrible accident. So you see, Eric, it's not really possible to get a lunar module back to Earth intact.
Could it be because they didn't want future generations able to visit museums and see these laughable 1960s attempts at high-tech looking space vehicles?
Well, no, because there are exact replicas in museums right now.
And what other 1960s technology is so advanced and expensive that it cannot be recreated easily and far better now than way back then?
Ah, I'm so glad you asked, Eric. You see, Don Pettit wasn't talking about the lunar module in his quote there. And he wasn't talking about the command module or the service module either. He was, of course, talking about the Saturn V rocket. Now, NASA haven't had launch capability from their own rocket for years. They simply don't have the budget to build a rocket that big and that powerful again. The current percentage of the national budget that NASA gets is around 0.48%. Now, compare that to the almost 4.5% of the national budget that they received in the late 1960s, and you can see why it's now a painful process to build up that launch capability again.
Let's take a closer look at this 1960s spaceship and see what else we can notice. For example, look at the paneling here on the side of the craft. If someone sheetrocked your house looking like this, you would be entitled to a full refund.
But your house isn't in a vacuum with zero weathering effects, is it?
Yet, with supposedly the best engineers and scientists in the world on the job, this is the kind of craftsmanship NASA provides?
Yes, the lunar lander needed to be as light as possible. They could not afford to weigh it down unnecessarily.
Look at the flimsy, haphazard, and careless construction materials and methods used. Look at the buckling, warping, and indentations showing how thin the paneling is. What is this thing? A Twinkie?
Your light-hearted critique of the lunar module doesn't make it any less believable that it actually went there.
No, I'm sure it's some super important and necessary high-tech device. Here there are press stubs, and here also has press stubs. But here, and here, they must have run out, so they used gold foil instead.
So, why does any of this mean that it didn't go to the moon?
And then over here, they must have run out of gold foil because they didn't bother with either. Look over here at the evenly spaced lines of gold foil going down the legs, until you get to this point where there is 3 lines right close together. It must be important because it's the connection point to the other crossbars, right? Let's look at another leg. Oh, no. On this one, they are all evenly spaced the whole way down. No 3 lines near the crossbar.
No, but there is 2. But again, this is all irrelevant. You're just being super picky so that your followers will go, yep, only 2 stripes of gold foil, not 3. That means it definitely didn't go to the moon.
Apollo 11 mission controller Harold Loden was quoted saying, "The skin on the crew cabin was very thin, and that was all done because of weight saving. If you really took your finger and poked hard at it, you could poke right through the outer skin of the spacecraft. It was about the thickness of 2 layers of aluminum foil." Project manager Thomas Kelly concurred, noting that the skin, the aluminum alloy skin of the crew compartment, was about 12 1/1000ths of an inch thick, equivalent to about 3 layers of Reynolds wrap that you would use in the kitchen.
But surely if you were faking the moon landing, you wouldn't be saying all of this. They did it to reduce weight. That is a logical argument. It follows that if the craft was too heavy, it would have troubles taking off and landing on the moon's surface.
Apollo astronaut Jim Lovell said, "Whenever I saw a model of the Lunar Module, it had these rigid sides and looked really strong. Turns out that external portions of the Lunar Module are actually made up of mylar and cellophane, and it's put together with Scotch tape and staples. We had to have pads on the floor, because if you dropped a screwdriver, it would go through the floor."
Again, why divulge all of this if it was faked?
Apollo astronaut Gus Grissom even famously hung a lemon on the lunar lander just weeks before the mission started. The dictionary describes lemon being a word used to describe things, especially automobiles, regarded as unsatisfactory, disappointing, or feeble.
An astronaut's opinion on the lunar module also isn't proof that they didn't go.
The lunar lander was never even once tested on Earth, landing here from any altitude before supposedly going and successfully landing on the moon.
Whilst the lunar modules were too expensive to test with, there was a lunar landing research vehicle made so that the astronauts could get used to how they would fly. The moon's gravity is 1/6 that of our own, so why would it prove useful to test the lunar module here on Earth anyway?
There, this pathetic cardboard and tinfoil construction allegedly fell from lunar orbit at 4,000 miles per hour, then used retro thrusters to slow it down and safely landed without a hitch on the lunar surface.
Actually, there was a hitch with Apollo 11. They overshot their landing site and almost ran out of fuel. And on one of the lunar landings, the lunar module came to rest at an angle after it didn't land properly.
When the astronauts did practice in other training vehicles, 3 out of 5 of them crashed, and you can see here how difficult they were to control, even in broad daylight, on Earth, in optimal conditions.
But it's never going to be optimal conditions because it's not the moon's atmosphere.
The idea that the actual lunar lander was never once tested on Earth, but then made a perfect landing on the moon, is one small step for lying Freemasons, and one giant leap for brainwashed mankind.
As I said, they didn't all land perfectly.
This is a 7,500-pound thruster. Look how powerful this is, how big, how much dust it kicks up, and the light it creates. The lunar lander's thruster was even bigger, at 10,000 pounds, and somehow didn't kick up any dust, left no blast crater under the craft, and not a grain of sand on the landing pads, as if it was gently placed down by a crane in a studio.
Not this one again. Right. The maximum thrust of the descent propulsion system on the lunar module was 10,125 pounds. We're going to use pounds for simplicity here. However, it was never used more than 60% of its maximum. So let's say during the descent, the thrust was about 6,000 pounds. The diameter of the exhaust nozzle was 59 inches, which means an area of 2,732 inches squared. Pressure is force divided by area, so the total pressure exerted here is around 2.2 psi. I weigh about 190 pounds and one of my feet has an area of around 45 square inches. So that means every time I take a step, one of my feet exerts a pressure of around 4.5 psi. So you have an engine that exerts less pressure than a human foot firing against solid rock. So it's no surprise that there wasn't a crater.
Here we see the lunar lander redocking with the command module. This is clearly fake and made with props, models, and footage similar to the Hollywood creations of the day, such as Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, created in 1968, the year before the first supposed moon landing. Look at the jerky, unrealistic motions and lack of thrusters being used.
You can't sit there, Eric, and tell me you didn't know that this footage was sped up, surely.
The craft is just being turned like a Rubik's Cube somehow. All of this supposedly happening as they both orbit the moon at 4,000 miles per hour. Since many people can't believe this is genuine footage, let me assure you, this is actual, official NASA footage of the Apollo 11 redocking.
But again, if they were faking it, why would they release this footage if it was so damning, as you say?
And this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to moon landing hoax evidence. If you still believe man has actually walked on the moon, and rovers are rolling around on Mars, please do me, yourself, and the rest of humanity a favor and watch my following presentation, link in the description box, the NASA Moon and Mars landing hoaxes.
And if you truly believe that the Earth is flat and that space is fake, then do yourself a favour and go and watch my first ever video and then watch them all in chronological order. What an absolute joke of a video that was from Mr. Eric Dubay there, absolutely dripping with personal incredulity. Let's leave Eric there drenched in his own state of disbelief and finish today's video. And Eric, I ask again, MC Toon is ready and willing and able to debate you, but we still haven't heard back from you, I'm afraid. Come on. Right, that's all for today. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. It'd be thoroughly appreciated, and hit that like button as well. Thank you. Just enough time to once again thank Blinkist for sponsoring today. Remember, the first 100 people that visit blinkist.com/SimonDan get 1 week free trial and then 25% off a full membership. I've been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a great weekend, and I'll see you all on Tuesday for more on Tartaria and the Mud Reset. See you then.